أصحاب السعادة، الضيوف الكرام، السيدات والسادة، الجلسة التالية في مسرح الواحة على وشك البدء. يرجى الجلوس في مقاعدكم وتحويل أجهزتكم المحمولة إلى الوضع الصامت، وشكراً.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we invite you to take your seats in the Al-Waha Theatre. The next session is starting shortly. Please ensure that your mobile devices are switched to silent. Thank you.
أصحاب السعادة، الضيوف الكرام، السيدات والسادة، ندعوكم للجلوس في مقاعدكم. الجلسة التالية على وشك البدء. يرجى تحويل أجهزتكم المحمولة إلى الوضع الصامت، وشكراً.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the next session in the Al-Waha Theatre is about to begin. Please take your seats and ensure that your mobile devices are switched to silent.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats as the next session is about to start.
Excellencies, ladies, gentlemen, dear friends, good morning. Good morning to this opening session of Nature, Land Use, and Ocean Day here at COP28 at the beautiful Al-Waha Theatre. My name is Wanjira Mathai, and I am the Managing Director for Africa and Global Partnerships at the World Resources Institute. Now I'm honored to be your MC today for this session on the agreement, from agreement to action, harnessing 30 by 30 to tackle climate change. It's a real pleasure, really, to spend this morning with you and set the tone for what ought to be a consequential day for climate. Before we proceed, I'd like to remind everybody that we have interpretation in English, French, Spanish, Arabic, Chinese, and Russian. So please use them as you need, the headsets as you need them, so that you can follow the wonderful proceedings we have set up for today. So nearly a year ago, the world's leaders adopted the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework at COP15 in Montreal. This landmark agreement saw countries set ambitious targets to halt and reverse biodiversity loss by 2030, towards putting nature on a path to recovery, to help reach a goal of living in harmony with nature by mid-century. As we will soon hear from our speakers, the science is absolutely clear that implementation of this framework needs to go hand in hand with the delivery of the Paris Agreement. And we cannot actually meet the goals of climate without urgently changing our relationship with nature. In fact, we know from science that all models have assumed that inform the 1.5-degree limit, have assumed the integrity of nature. So we now have just 6 years to implement the targets of the Global Biodiversity Framework against its 2030 timeline. And we see mounting impacts of climate change already. And we also see continued loss of biodiversity, quite frankly, at an unprecedented scale. The threat of 2 million species at risk of extinction not only harms humanity's capacity to respond to climate change and cushion us from the worst impacts, but it also is a tragedy for nature. In this decisive decade, therefore, we need to have emissions, we know that, and rapidly scale adaptation to climate impacts. Our governments and leaders from across society need to urgently stop waging war on nature, as the UN Secretary General continues to remind us, and instead turn the tide to work with nature and build a climate-safe and nature-positive, prosperous future for all. So today we will take stock of the progress that has been made by leading countries that have started implementing this framework, focusing on one of its central targets, the protection and conservation of 30% of the planet's land and oceans by 2030. We'll also hear from governments and other leaders on their actions that show momentum in the financing of nature conservation to support governments achieve the 30 by 30 targets. This event, I want to acknowledge, is co-hosted by the COP28 presidency, the UN climate change high-level champions, and two groups that have spearheaded the adoption of 30 by 30, that spearheaded it last year, the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People and the Campaign for Nature. We're grateful for their solidarity and leadership in this work. So, ladies and gentlemen, we will start our session with two special guests, Her Excellency Razan Al-Mubarak, high-level champion for COP28, my dear sister, and His Excellency Huang Runqiu, the COP15 president who brought 188 countries together last year to adopt the Global Biodiversity Framework, and he's also the Minister for Climate Change and Ecology of the People's Republic of China. We'll start with Dr. Razan. The floor is yours.
Good morning, and thank you, Anjira, for your warm welcome and for your informative and inspiring opening remarks. Distinguished guests, together with the UAE COP28 presidency, we are eager to welcome you all to the opening of the Nature, Land Use, and Oceans Day at COP28. This dedicated day exists because of the recognition that there can be no success for the Paris Agreement without nature. Actions to conserve, actions to restore nature greatly strengthens our resilience against climate impacts and provides more than 1/3 of the mitigation potential required by 2030. At the same time, we cannot achieve the Global Biodiversity Framework targets without urgent action on climate, as worsening climate change puts millions of species at risk and threatens the resilience of entire ecosystems when we actually need them the most. With the Paris Agreement and the Global Biodiversity Framework, we have two clear guidelines for governments and non-party stakeholders to chart a new relationship with the natural world, a relationship that brings balance to both our atmosphere and life on our planet. And this is why the UAE, as the COP28 presidency, and China, as the CBD COP15 presidency, will together launch the COP28 Joint Statement for Climate, Nature, and People. This statement will bring together over a dozen countries, including Brazil and the United States, as well as actors and leaders from non-party stakeholders, to collaborate on a common agenda for integrated action for climate and nature towards COP16 and COP30. The 30 by 30 target offers a clear and actionable framework. Whilst governments are working towards reaching this target, successes cannot be delivered by governments alone. The successful implementation of the global biodiversity framework requires a whole-of-society approach. This includes, fundamentally and crucially, Indigenous peoples and local communities, who make up 80%, who, through their support, steward and conserve over 80% of the world's biodiversity. Forest lands that are owned, occupied, or managed by Indigenous peoples also hold at least 1/4 of all forest carbon. The launch of the IUCN Pudong Initiative is a step forward in recognizing and empowering this stewardship with the goal to facilitate direct access to financing. And at the same time, we have seen unprecedented momentum since the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework across the private sector, as they also recognize their reliance on nature for their business activities. Over 150 businesses are now integrating nature into their transition plans through the adoption of science-based targets for nature and committing to ending deforestation by 2030. As we approach the end of COP28, Nature Day is a unique moment to ensure that the inclusion of nature-based solutions in the global stocktake. This is fundamental, ladies and gentlemen, and it is clear from the actions mobilized here at COP that non-state actors are stepping up and demonstrating the desire and the will to change course. This groundswell support and action by non-party stakeholders is being met by the political will, but it must be enabled by finance. It is this convergence of science, of will, of finance, that is the inflection point that we need to truly leverage the power of nature for both people and climate. Thank you very much for your attention, and I wish you a very successful Nature Day at COP28. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for that wonderful reminder to kick us off this morning. I would now like to introduce a recorded video from His Excellency Juan Ronquiu. He's the Minister for Ecology and Environment from the People's Republic of China. Take a look.
尊敬的各位阁下、各位代表、女士们、先生们、朋友们，大家上午好！很高兴与大家相聚云端，共同参加今天的活动，庆祝昆明蒙特利尔全球生物多样性框架达成1周年。在这里我作为生物多样性公约第15次缔约方大会 COP15 主席，并代表中国生态环境部向主办方举办这次的活动表示衷心的感谢，向各位嘉宾的到来表示热烈欢迎，向所有关心、支持全球生物多样性保护和应对气候变化工作的各界人士表示崇高的敬意。气候变化、生物多样性丧失，给人类生存与发展带来了严峻挑战。令人鼓舞的是，在去年12月召开的 COP15 第2阶段会议上，中国作为主席国，引领推动达成了包括昆明框架在内的具有里程碑意义的一揽子决定，历史性的确定了3030目标，历史性的决定设立昆明框架基金， 历史性描绘了2050年人与自然和谐共生的美好愿景，为全球生物多样性治理拨画了蓝图，设定了目标，明确了路径，凝聚了力量。捆绑框架是一份富有雄心、平衡、务实、包容、变革性的自然协议，强调各级政府和全社会的共同行动与合作，明确发达国家流向发展中国家的国际生物多样性资金规模，认可土著居民和社区在生物多样性保护、恢复和可持续利用等方面的重要权利和贡献。其中，3030目标对协同推进保护生物多样性和应对气候变化、增强地球生命共同体气候韧具有重要作用。我们期待 COP28
We look forward to COP28 practicing true multilateralism, conducting a global stock-taking focused on implementation, and achieving positive and fruitful results.
女士们、先生们
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends,
将雄心转
currently translating ambition into action is a top priority for us.
Thank you very much. That message from His Excellency from China, delivering a message, and delighted to hear that China will be joining the High Ambition Coalition for Nature. That's exactly the sort of action we need. I'd now like to introduce the director of the High Ambition Coalition for Nature, my sister, Ms. Rita El-Zaghloul, and as well as two leading scientists who will remind us of the role of the 30 by 30 in tackling climate change. Dr. Thomas Crowther from ETH Zurich, my dear brother, and also Dr. Brendan McKay. He's the director of the Griffith Climate Action Beacon from Griffith University. Dear Rita, the floor is yours.
Dear Excellencies, Ministers, colleagues, it's a pleasure to be with all of you today here. I am honored to start this segment by welcoming China and joining the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People. What a great announcement to begin this day, really, what a great announcement, and thank you very much for that. I'm the director of the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People, a coalition of now 118 countries, co-chaired by Costa Rica, France, and the UK, championing the protection and conservation of at least 30% of the planet's land and ocean by 2030. Since the inception of the coalition, we have been led by science. And so it's my great pleasure to be with you too today. Our members took science and drove that through the diplomacy, and we were able to achieve the adoption of the 30 by 30 target. Professor Crowther, we know you work in one of the world's leading academic institutes on ecology. Please tell us why conservation, and more specifically the 30 by 30 target, is critical in the delivery of the Paris Agreement goals.
Thank you so much. You don't need a scientist to stand up here and tell you the value of nature, because we all inherently understand it, following millions of years of evolution where we have depended on these magical ecosystems for every aspect of our survival. They support everything that we do, and that is why the link between nature and climate is so critical, because they also, as a byproduct, contribute to carbon drawdown, storing billions of tons of carbon for millions of years. But this link between nature and climate has not always been a benefit. There's been both benefits, and it's also been a challenge, because it's given rise to misconceptions around the role of mass tree plantations. And these carbon farms are not necessarily nature. They can damage biodiversity across the globe. They can be really damaging when they're used as an excuse to avoid cutting emissions, which would do more harm than good. And this has given rise to scientific controversy that's undermined the environmental movement. because it's given rise to concerns around the role of nature in fighting climate change. To address this controversy, for the first time, hundreds of ecologists across the globe have joined forces to build the Integrated Global Forest Assessment, pulling data together from 1.1 million forests across the globe to assess the scale of our global forest carbon storage to date. Published in the journal Nature, this represents a comprehensive understanding of these ecosystems, and by linking that ground source data with satellite observations across the globe, we can generate a comprehensive understanding of the potential for these ecosystems to capture additional carbon, showing that there's room for 226 billion tons of extra carbon in our ecosystems. This represents a third of our carbon drawdown needs. But what's exciting is it showed where we can achieve that carbon. So we've depleted our forests by deforestation, by removing that land, those ecosystems. We have also, though, degraded the remaining ecosystems that we have left, which means that the conservation of existing forests is our most powerful carbon drawdown tool, allowing those ecosystems to regenerate. Then on top of that, the recovery of diverse ecosystems in degraded landscapes can achieve the remainder. This cannot be achieved, though, through mass plantations, because the power of nature is in its complexity, which means that diverse forests store more than twice as much carbon as monoculture plantations would. And we cannot be achieving this without emissions cuts. There can be no choice between cutting emissions and nature because we categorically need both. But we have to move beyond our tunnel vision focus on carbon, because really the true value of nature is that it is our inspiration. It's our life support system, our climate resilience, climate adaptation, and livelihoods for billions of people across the globe. We need to be distributing the flow of wealth on our planet towards the millions of local communities, indigenous populations, and farmers who are the stewards of nature across our planet. It's only when nature and people thrive together that we will have long-term carbon capture as a byproduct.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Crowther, for this amazing synergies and for bringing this overview to the table. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Professor Mackey. Professor, you were one of the scientists that ensured that the 6th IPCC report noted that at least 30% of the planet must be conserved to unlock the benefits of intact ecosystem in mitigating climate change. Could you please share more about the importance of 30 by 30, both for reverting biodiversity loss and tackling climate change?
Certainly, and my colleague here told you about the mitigation value of ecosystem restoration. Complementing that is to understand the mitigation power of forest protection. There we go. So to answer this question, we need to understand how much carbon is retained and stored in the world's forest ecosystems. To do this, we pull together data from the European Space Agency on above-ground living biomass and the FAO on soil carbon. And this map here shows you the density of forest carbon in the world's forests. The colours represent the 3 main forest biomes. The green is tropical moist forest and subtropical moist forest. The orange is temperate forest, and the blue is boreal forest. This map also shows that boreal and temperate forests are largely the sovereign domain of the global north, but tropical forests are very much the sovereign responsibility of the least developed and emerging economies. We could then aggregate those data by forest ecosystem type. And this graph is very complicated. It shows you the amount of carbon in the major types of forest ecosystems in the world. On the right-hand side, you have tropical forests. If you could have a look at that, there are 2 columns. The left-hand one shows you the amount of living biomass and soil carbon in tropical forests. It's about 250 billion tonnes of carbon. The right-hand column shows you the percentage that's in a protected area, as defined by the IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, protected area governance categories 1 to 6. And you can see it's about 19%. There's 81% unprotected. On the left, you have boreal forest, which that shows it's about 150 billion tonnes. It's actually an underestimate because we lack global data sets on 3 critical components of the carbon pool: underground roots, dead biomass on the surface, and peat. If we had global data on them, it would double the amount shown in boreal forests. But there's only 10% of them in a IUCN protected area. So what does all this mean in terms of climate mitigation? Well, I've got a lot of numbers there, but let me just summarise them. There is overall, only about 18% of the world's forests are in a IUCN categorised protected area. If you look at all the world's forests, there's about, what do I say up there, about 646 billion tonnes of carbon. Well, to understand the mitigation value, we need to translate that into the CO2 equivalents. If it was oxidised and put into the atmosphere, how much CO2 would there be? Well, there's about 1.4 trillion tonnes of CO2 equivalent stored in the world's forests. Okay? How much of that is stored in protected areas? Currently, at 18% protected, it's about 400 billion tonnes of CO2 equivalent. If we were to, and this is the answer to your question, for 30 by 30, if we were to increase the percentage of the world's forests that are protected from the current 19% to 30%, there would be stored around 800 billion tonnes of CO2 equivalent. I've got some numbers on the right which are interesting. In addition to the retained carbon value stored, as our colleague noted, this stock is growing. Forests remove about 60 billion tonnes of CO2 equivalent every year, but we lose half of that in emissions from deforestation and degradation. It's about 30 billion tonnes of CO2 equivalent. The mitigation gap for 1.5 degrees between now and 2030 revealed in the global stock takes about 100 billion tonnes of CO2 equivalent. So forest protection and forest restoration is a very powerful mitigation strategy when coupled with reduction in fossil fuel emissions. And finally, one of the fantastic and very powerful innovations in the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework is that this 30 by 30 target can be met not only through IUCN protected areas, but also through what are called OECMs, which stands for Other Effective Area-Based Conservation Measures. Now, what is that? Well, it includes Indigenous territories. And I've got an exemplar here from the southeast of the Brazilian Amazon. The figure on the left, the area in the middle is the territory of the Kaiapó Tribal Alliance. It's 9.4 million hectares. The figure on the left shows all the human-started fires that have occurred there in the last 20 years. The figure on the right shows you all the logging and deforestation and mining that has occurred since 1985 in aggregate. And you can see that the western two-thirds of that area, the 9.4 million hectares, has been protected. Its ecosystem integrity has been maintained, not by accident, but by the active intervention and protection activities of the Kaiapó Tribal Alliance, who are delivering not only conservation outcomes, but they are protecting about 1.7 gigatons of carbon. I'm sure you'll all agree that's a very notable conservation and mitigation achievement.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you for all your work. And of course, the success report on the IPCC was crucial for the negotiations. Thank you. Thank you, Professor. Your contributions to the 6th IPCC report were crucial for the negotiations last December at the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. And now I'm going to rapidly introduce you the work that we have been doing within the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People. The Hack for Nature and People, it's the biggest coalition of countries for nature. We have countries from all regions, including and with many of the mega diverse countries. We have been working with indigenous peoples and local communities, organizations, with scientists, with philanthropists, and with civil society in order to make sure that this 30 by 30 target was adopted. Now that the target has been adopted, we have been working very strongly in order to make sure that we have the correct actions in order for countries to be able to implement this target. But we really only have 6 years. This is not a lot of time. If we look now, today, as of today, we only have approximately 17% of land that has been protected and only 8% on ocean. So we do need to work very quickly together. This is why I am very proud to announce that today, here, we are launching the Hack for Nature and People tools in order to be able to support governments in their efforts in the implementation of the 30 by 30 target. The first two tools are the financial and the technical matchmaking tools. Those tools will provide a platform for countries to be able to submit their requests specifically on their needs for the 30 by 30 target. On those same tools, we will be able to receive offers from the assistance providers, such as other governments, philanthropists, civil society, in order to make sure that we are able to match those tools from the Hack Secretariat. We will support with that, to make sure that through collaboration, we are able to calibrate those requests and those offers, and we're able to match them. The second tool is the 30 by 30 Solutions Toolkit. The toolkit is really a conglomerate of a lot of information related to the 30 by 30. For all of you who were not included in the negotiations of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, Target 3 is a pretty lengthy paragraph of 20 sentences. What we have done with the tools, with the 30 by 30 Solutions Toolkit, in collaboration with IUCN, WCPA, and TNC, is that we have deconstructed those 12 sentences into elements. And those elements are reflecting the science behind those elements, but also innovative tools and materials, such as videos and podcasts. We also hope that through this tool of 30 by 30 Solutions Toolkit, we will be able to have countries sharing their good experiences and best practices. We really want those tools to be government-led, but also need-based led. So with those tools, we are hoping that we will be able to advance quickly and swiftly. Thomas, I understand that you too have been developing some exciting tools, and you have been recognized by the Earthshot Prize. Could you share about the progress of Restore?
Yes, thank you again. The challenge of global restoration is a social equity challenge. We need to empower people across the planet with biodiversity. And to help in the transparency in this process, to help governments and organizations with that tracking, scientists across the globe have built this tool, Restore, so that you can draw around any location on the planet for free and get data on carbon, water, and biodiversity. Just like this farm in Ethiopia, an agroforestry farm where they're protecting a forest so that they can have coffee plants growing underneath. And in the process of doing so, they're capturing carbon and water that is helping us all, and they're also able to show it transparently to their customers who can now engage in global restoration with every coffee they drink. And there's hundreds of millions of initiatives like this across our planet, and that is why Ethiopia is using this to track their national commitments and targets as they move towards biodiversity and carbon goals. Similarly, Costa Rica and other countries are using exactly this same tool for their standardized national scale reporting in a way that's transparent so that everyone everywhere can engage and can see the process.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, from the Hack, we stand ready to support all the countries in the implementation of 30 by 30. We stand ready to achieve this goal by 2030. And I wish to close this segment by quoting Jacques Cousteau. People protect what they love. People love what they understand. And people understand what they are taught. Thank you both for sharing your knowledge in order for us to be able to understand more and protect more of what we love. Thank you very much. Back to you, Andrea.
Thank you very much for those powerful words from all of you, Dr. Crowther, Dr. McKay. Indeed, the power of nature is in its complexity. Nature is our life support system. Congratulations to the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People for launching the 30 by 30 Solutions Toolkit and the High Ambition Coalition Matchmaking Platform. I believe those tools will be of great use as we charge the campaign forward. Thank you all for your work. Now, I have to make an apology. I'm terribly sorry. I'm told that the recorded video from His Excellency Huang Runqiu was cut short, and we missed a crucial part of it. So I'm going to beg your indulgence as we replay that video. Here it is again.
尊敬的各位阁下、各位代表、女士们、先生们、朋友们，大家上午好！很高兴与大家相聚云端，共同参加今天的活动，庆祝昆明蒙特利尔全球生物多样性框架达成1周年。在这里啊，
Here, in my capacity as the president of the CPD COP28,
并代表
and on behalf of the MEE of China, I would like to express my heartfelt thanks to the organizers for hosting this event and extend a warm welcome to all the distinguished guests and express my high respect to all people from all walks of life who are concerned with and supportive of the global efforts in biodiversity conservation and combating climate change. Climate change and the loss of biodiversity pose serious challenges to human survival and development. It is encouraging that in the second part of COP15 last December, China, as the presidency, led the way in the adoption of landmark decisions, including the KMGBF. The historic establishment of the 30 by 30 target and the historic decision to set up the GBF fund, historically depicting a beautiful vision of harmony between human beings and nature by 2050. It has drawn a blueprint, set goals, clarified paths, and consolidated strengths for global biodiversity governance. The KMGBF is an ambitious, balanced, practical, inclusive, and transformational agreement on nature. It stresses joint efforts and cooperation between governments at all levels and the whole society, identifies the scale of funding from developed countries to developing countries for biodiversity, and recognizes the significant rights and contributions of the indigenous peoples and local communities in biodiversity conservation, restoration, and its sustainable use. Among them, the 30 by 30 target is important for synergizing biodiversity conservation and climate change response, and for enhancing the climate resilience of our home planet. We look forward to COP28 practicing true multilateralism, conducting a global stock-taking focused on implementation, and achieving positive and fruitful results. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, currently, translating ambition into action is a top priority for the parties. In accordance with KMGBF targets, China is promoting to build a protected area system with national parks as the mainstay, and over 30% of terrestrial area has been protected through the ecosystem. Critical systems, rare and endangered species, and their habitats are hence under extensive and integrated protection. China will soon release the National Biodiversity Conservation Strategy and Action Plan 2023 to 2030, NBSAP. At the same time, under the framework of the Green Belt and Road Initiative and the South-South Cooperation, China will give full play to the Kunming Biodiversity Fund to provide support for other developing countries to the best of our ability. In my capacity as the COP15 president, I call on all parties to update NBSAPs promptly, mobilize more resources from all sources, and advance the 3 goals of CBD in a balanced manner, aiming to reverse the trend of global biodiversity loss. I welcome all stakeholders to be an active part in biodiversity governance and make investments in biodiversity conservation and sustainable utilization, establish platforms, partnerships, and make unremitting efforts to promote the building of a community of life between human beings and nature. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, China highly commend and support all pledges initiatives and partnerships that will facilitate GBF implementation. Taking this event as an opportunity, I would like to announce that China is now a member of the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People. At the same time, I have the pleasure to also announce that China is launching the Action Initiative for Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework to further pull political will to act on the KMGBF. I am convinced that this initiative represents practical actions and look forward to and welcome your participation for more strengths jointly promoting the implementation of KMGBF. China is willing to work with the international community to address global challenges such as the loss of biodiversity and climate change and to jointly promote the success of COP28, so as to build a global home in which human beings and nature can coexist in harmony. Lastly, I wish this event a complete success. Thank you.
There it was. Now you saw why I was excited. That was a wonderful welcome to the High Ambition Coalition for China. Yesterday, I was part of a wonderful consultation, an informal consultation with indigenous leaders from Brazil, from the Congo Basin, and from the forests of Southeast Asia. Inspiring to see the leadership of indigenous peoples across this world in protecting and continuing to be the custodians and the guardians of nature. So this first panel is particularly special for that reason. Ambition in action for 30 by 30 with ministers and indigenous leaders all taking practical action to deliver 30 by 30 right now. It's my honor to invite the moderator of this session, Ms. Jennifer Littlejohn. She's the Acting Assistant Secretary of the U.S. And I'd like to welcome you, Jennifer, up on stage, but also at the same time invite the panelists, Excellency Mariam Al-Mheri, Minister for Climate Change and Environment from the UAE, the Honorable Kosier P. Frederick, Minister for Environment, Rural Modernization, Kanago Upliftment and Constituency Empowerment, the Government of Dominica, Ms. Deborah Sanchez, the Executive Director of Clarifi, Excellency Sonia Guajara, Minister of Indigenous Peoples of Brazil, Excellency Isiaq Salako, Minister of Environment from Nigeria, and Excellency Benoit Charlotte, Minister of Environment, Fight Against Climate Change, Wildlife and Parks from Quebec. Assistant Littlejohn, over to you.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Ambition in Action panel. Can't think of a better way to kickstart Nature Day at COP28. Now, we have a lot to discuss with very little time, so I'm going to jump right in. We have the ambition, that's clear. With the adoption last year of the Global Biodiversity Framework and then this year of the High Seas Treaty, which so far has more than 80 signatories at last count. Now, I think we all can agree, it's time for action. And as this panel is titled, Ambition in Action. We will discuss what the coalition and its partners are doing to realize 30 by 30 and to marshal the billions in financing needed for biodiversity funding. Now, let me open by talking a little bit about what the United States is doing. Protecting our planet, advancing conservation, and addressing climate change are clear U.S. priorities from our president on down. The United States has already made significant strides towards conserving at least 30% of our lands and ocean, a goal set by President Biden in his first week of his administration. For example, in March of this year, the President declared an intent to create a new national marine sanctuary to protect U.S. waters around the Pacific remote islands. The process for designation is ongoing right now. This new sanctuary would ensure the United States will reach the President's goal of conserving at least 30% of our ocean and under U.S. jurisdiction by 2030. We are modernizing our strategies for managing the nation's public lands so that they continue to provide abundant and well-connected wildlife habitats, supply clean drinking water, and power local economies. And the United States has also made significant new investments in conservation and environmental protection through the recently enacted bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act. The United States is also investing through this act $10 billion in conservation initiatives under President Biden, more than any other president in our history. We are working with partners around the world as well. Reaching the global 30 by 30 goal will take all of us working together, and we are engaged in many international efforts, including working with the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People. The United States is continuing its leadership on forest conservation, including by co-chairing the Forest and Climate Leaders Partnership, which seeks to mobilize policies, partnerships, and resources on sustainable land use, public and private financing, and Indigenous peoples and local communities initiatives. The United States is also supporting countries to conserve lands through debt for nature swaps. We do this through a 25-year-old program under the Tropical Forest and Coral Conservation Act, as well as through the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, which recently provided political risk insurance for major debt for nature swaps in Ecuador and Belize. Protecting the high seas is also crucial for achieving 30 by 30. We don't need to wait for the High Seas Treaty to go into effect to establish marine protected areas. We're looking for opportunities to do so now, particularly in the Antarctic. More broadly, to support the implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework, the United States looks forward to working with governments, Indigenous peoples, and non-government partners on capacity building, scientific and technical cooperation, and to mobilizing the resources needs from all sources. We are exploring how we can scale up nature-positive finance, and I look forward to hearing from our panelists today about their own initiatives and vision. And with that, I'll take my seat and we'll get started. So first, I have the honor to introduce Her Excellency Mariam Almiri, Minister of Climate Change and Environment for the United Arab Emirates. Minister Almiri, the UAE is one of the pioneers of the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People. What actions is the UAE taking now to implement the important global target of 30 by 30, and how will this agenda be carried forward in the coming years?
Thank you so much. And first of all, we welcome you all here to the UAE. And hasn't it been incredible so far? We've been getting great momentum in so many areas, be it health, food, and today, of course, really raising the bar on nature, land use, and oceans. So we are proud to fully embrace the 30 by 30 goal. Because for us, this is a commitment we have been on the journey for biodiversity, have been doing for many years, but it's also reflected in our updated National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan. It is a significant step forward to our journey in ensuring to sustain life in our desert, seas, and skies. It really encapsulates our vision and outlines strategic actions to protect and enhance biodiversity in all 7 emirates of the UAE. This comprehensive approach really integrates our national identity and resonates deeply with our values. We have so far 49 protected areas in the UAE. Just over 12.1% of our marine is protected, and also 18.5% of our land is protected. And we want to also commit to working closely with the High Ambition Coalition. I think it's so fantastic to see some of the technologies which Fish Restore has just presented to us in really raising the bar on how we can understand the data that can be captured on carbon, water and biodiversity. And really the journey that the UAE has gone has come from our founding father, the late Sheikh Zayed, who himself was a very passionate environmentalist. I mean, just to give you a story, back in the 60s, when they were building the infrastructure, if there was a tree along the way, he would never cut down the tree and always made sure everything went around it. So it is part of our DNA. We have pledged to plant 100 million mangroves by 2030. That was an announcement we made at COP26. We're at about 46 million from those 100 million, so we still have a little bit to go, but well underway. We also have deployed more than 5,000 artificial reefs while building the world's largest coral nursery, home to 1.5 million corals. I'm not sure, just before COP28, there was an announcement by Dubai. The Emirate of Dubai launched probably the world's biggest ocean restoration and ecotourism project. It's called Dubai Reefs. It will be spanning an artificial reef that spans over 200 square kilometers. So there's lots underway. When it comes to modern wastewater treatment methods, these have been deployed in over 60 facilities, combining science and engineering to reduce our impact on biodiversity. We also, the groundbreaking commitment to spearhead the 2030 seagrass breakthrough. This is an initiative championed by the Convention on Migratory Species Abu Dhabi office under the Dugong MOU in collaboration with the UN High-Level Climate Champion team presided over my colleague, Her Excellency Razan, and it really reflects the UAE's long-standing dedication to preserving our marine environments. Excitingly, the 2030 Seagrass Breakthrough will be launched on World Seagrass Day in March 2024, and seeks to catalyze financial flows of at least $122 million, and will establish basically a global seagrass fund. So I invite nations and partners to join the 2030 Seagrass Breakthrough, because we can only work together by making sure we're looking at ecosystems to ensure that we keep our North Star within reach, the 1.5 degrees. I'm also delighted to announce that the UAE is joining the Global Freshwater Challenge, which enables us to play a part with the global community. These underscore our commitment to conserving critical habitats and fostering a sustainable relationship to our natural world. And really, we're so excited in really moving the biodiversity to the next level. It is marked by ambition, by action and collaboration, and our updated NBSAP is a promise to the future generations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Almiri. And now, I'd like to introduce the Honorable Kozia Frederick, Minister for the Environment, Rural Modernization, Kalinga Upliftment, and Constituency Empowerment in the Government of the Commonwealth of Dominica.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, greetings. The Commonwealth of Dominica joined the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People to protect 30%, at least 30% of the planet's land and seas by 2030. And since then, we have been working with two very solid partners, Dr. Enric Sala of the National Geographic Pristine Seas Project and Christine Reckerberger of Dynamic Planet. And so to declare the creation of the world's first sperm whale reserve, to protect the sperm whales of our space. We realize that across the oceans, the world's largest mammals are showing signs of distress. The record of mass die-offs, mysterious illnesses, ship strikes, and puzzling changes in behavior make it clear that whales need a lifeline. In Dominica, there's a documented decline for the last 20 years in the number of whale families. However, there are currently 200 whales which have made the waters of Dominica their homes. And we are committed to ensure that they continue to survive in our waters. This marine protected area will be roughly the size of our own island. Cargo, cruise and other large vessels will be banned from traversing the reserve. This will have the multiple effect of reducing the risk of ship strikes, reduce the ship noise in critical area for feeding and nursing, and reduce the risk of fish aggregating devices being destroyed by large ships. Thus, we will reduce the cost of fishers and the risk of whale entanglement in drift fishing gear. What is very important is that the reserve itself will include a corridor. It will be perpendicular to the shore to allow ships to access our ports, and it will cover 3% of our exclusive economic zone. The science is very, very clear. We have been advised that the sperm whale sequesters carbon at a rate equivalent to taking 5,000 cars off the road every year. This decision is important to us in Dominica as part of our overall ambition to reduce carbon emissions and to create a safe and brighter future for all. This sperm whale reserve adds to 2 already existing marine protected areas within the Dominican space, and we are actively pursuing the declaration of additional marine protected areas in the near future. Dominica is a small state, a very, very small state. We are on the front line of climate change, but we are playing our part, and we need others to do the same. And importantly, we need those who are able to do the same, and to help us scale up our ambition to protect more fully life above and below water. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Obviously, like many small island nations, Dominica knows firsthand how interlinked nature loss and climate change are. So I want to thank you for sharing the steps you're taking to protect biodiversity loss and also offer safe haven to species. Now I have the pleasure of introducing Ms. Deborah Sanchez, Executive Director of Clarify, the Community Land Rights and Conservation Finance Initiative. Ms. Sanchez, how can Indigenous people, Afro-descendant people, and local community-led funds contribute to the way forward for the future of nature conservation and, more specifically, the implementation of 30 by 30 on the ground?
Thank you. Titan Yamni Kumibanira, I want to greet you in the language of my ancestors. We indigenous peoples, local community, and Afro-descendant conserve 80% of the biodiversity of the world. And with our spirituality, with our way of living, with the connection with Mother Earth in nature, and that relationship also is being proven that is one of the most cost-effective options for conserving nature. As the scientists referred earlier in the example, right, there is also a growing body of research and knowledge that confirming that the connection between securing land rights, territories for indigenous community, local community, and Afro-descendant is linked directly to positive outcome on conservation. And it's actually a solution that is protecting us from and preventing human rights violations that have been historically played in many traditional conservation strategies. Yes, I think we are all here seeing how wonderful is the indigenous knowledge. Yet we only receive less than 1% of the funding that is dedicated for climate. And only 17% of climate and conservation funding intended for indigenous peoples, local community, and Afro-descendants supports actually reach the community level. That's why we are building a new IPLC led and governed in finance infrastructure and finance mechanisms to increase funding for community-led conservation. So we have from global approaches like the Shandia Vision or clarify itself to regional funds in the Mesoamerican Regional Fund, or Nusantara funds in Indonesia, and many more that are being developed at the national, regional, and global level. So I'm a director of one of those funds, the Community Land Right and Finance Conservation Initiative, CLARIFY, which was launched last year, and with the objective to channel funding from the globe to the communities directly. We want to scale up the funding for the recognition of indigenous peoples, local community, and Afro-descendant land rights, and for the efforts on conservation in middle and low-income countries. So we are already active. We have 52 projects across the world, and a dozen of them are in development, and I'm seeing here a lot of my brothers and sisters that are developing these projects. So our goal is to play a major role in achieving the ambitious 30 by 30 target as a new conservation paradigm that will recognize and respect our invaluable contribution to protecting the planet, to protecting our Mother Earth. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sanchez. And now it is my honor to introduce His Excellency Isiaq Salako, Minister of Environment for Nigeria. Minister Salako, Nigeria's leadership, quick question. Nigeria's leadership was pivotal in achieving the 30 by 30 target at COP15. Can you share with us how Nigeria is supporting 30 by 30 implementation at home and across your region, and your proposals regarding nature finance?
Thank you very much, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. First, thank you, UAE, for hosting a very wonderful COP28. I am honored to bring greetings to you from Nigeria and from the President of my country, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, a nature champion that is leading Nigeria in the path of sustainable use of our natural resources and heightened attention to nature-based solutions to address climate change. As we gather to highlight progress made towards protecting and conveying and conserving at least 30% of the world's land and oceans to help deliver on our Paris Agreement goal, Nigeria reiterates her commitment to work with the global community to achieve the 1.5-degree climate target. The African continent is vulnerable to climate change than any other continent. It is clear that there is inequality in the way countries are impacted by the biodiversity crisis. In West Africa and in my country, Nigeria, a lack of solutions means that our communities become poorer, our food security is jeopardized, and our rural populations are forced to relocate, resulting in loss of livelihoods, security challenges, and sadly, a lot of time, loss of lives. This scenario is not obtainable everywhere. The vision of Nigeria and the rest of Africa is to ensure that the world truly unites and responds as one. Because Africa will be the most affected by climate change. We are united in being the most ambitious in protecting our land and our seas. In the ECOWAS region alone, ECOWAS countries have reached a consensus to support the ambitious target of protecting 30% of our land and oceans by 2030, which is evident by 14 member states having joined the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People. Nigeria, as a member of HAC, is mobilizing ECOWAS countries to launch a regional coordination process to map out our joint contribution to 30 by 30. Just 2 weeks ago, ECOWAS countries met in Abuja, Nigeria, and agreed on a pathway to promptly ratify the newly adopted High Seas Treaty to facilitate the designation of highly and fully protected areas in the global ocean beyond national jurisdiction. For Nigeria, this is an essential and urgent step, and we invite all of you to ratify this treaty. I am very pleased to announce that Nigeria is launching a ministerial alliance for nature finance alongside Liberia, Samoa, and Sierra Leone. As part of the diversity-rich countries from the Global South, we are uniting to champion the importance of meeting the biodiversity financing target that the world agreed to last year at COP28. The goal of this alliance is to promote ambition on biodiversity finance and mutual accountability in delivering the $20 billion USD per year by 2025, a pledge made by developed countries. To be clear, this commitment to international biodiversity finance is not charity. It is a promise that must be kept and one of our many investments that is required to help achieve global nature and climate goals, sustainable economic development, social stability, and geopolitical security. I invite you to join the Ministerial Alliance for Nature Finance now as a commitment to meeting the nature finance goals essential for the implementation of 30 by 30. There is no time to wait. Let us act now, together for nature. I thank you all for your kind attention, and I wish you safe trip back as we begin to round up with COP28. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Minister Salako. All right, next it is my pleasure to introduce His Excellency Stephen Guilbeault, Minister of Environment and Climate Change for Canada. Minister Guilbeault, Canada has played a pivotal role in the advancement of the nature agenda globally through hosting COP15 and the Jeff Assembly, being a hack for nature and people champion country, and then creating the Nature Champions Network. Yeah. What is Canada doing to further the protection and financing of nature at home and globally? And how will the Nature Champions Network build the political momentum we need from now to CBD COP16?
Well, thank you very much. And perhaps before I answer your question, maybe it's worth taking a moment to remember that a year ago, together, we adopted the historic agreement at COP15. And 6 months before that, we didn't even know if we would be able to host COP15. And this historic agreement was made possible because we all came together. Countries north and south, indigenous peoples, scientists, non-governmental organizations. We came together collectively to make it happen, and now we have to continue working together to deploy and to fulfill the promise that we achieved at COP15. So for all of that, I want to say, as the host country, it was amazing to be with you last year, and it's amazing to be with you here again today. In terms of what Canada's doing, just to go back a little bit in time, when our government comes into power in 2015, Canada's protecting about 10% of our terrestrial lands and about 1% of our oceans. And by the end of next year, we'll roughly be at 20% for both. So we've made tremendous strides in terms of both land and oceans protection. But I think the most important thing that we've done in the last few years, and the only way that Canada will be able to achieve our 30 by 30 goal, is by working with Indigenous peoples, which is why we have put Indigenous-led conservation at the heart of our implementation strategy in Canada. In the last 2 months, we've announced a number of very large Indigenous-led conservation area that span about 1 million square kilometers. So that's roughly 4 times the size of the United Kingdom. Which unfortunately only gives us 4% of our conservation goal. That's how big Canada is. But moving forward, it is clear to us that Indigenous-led conservation must be the way forward. In fact, we've signed an historic agreement with one of our provinces, British Columbia, where moving forward, all conservation projects in the province the decisions will be made by Indigenous people, the provincial government, and the federal government as partners, as equal partners in fulfilling that promise. That agreement came with a $1 billion investment by both governments. And what is true of Canada, in our view, is also true of the world. We have to support Indigenous-led conservation around the world. Canada dedicated 20% of our climate finance commitment at Glasgow to nature-based solutions. And we, as you rightly pointed out, we have launched at the GEF the Nature Champions Network. We have Costa Rica, Chad, St. Kitts and Nevis, the United States, the European Union, France. And the idea behind the Nature's Champions Network is, as you know, there are many targets coming out of Montreal, and we want to pair countries north and south to take one target and to work on it to ensure that we achieve it as rapidly as possible. And I'm so grateful for the participation of all those countries that have agreed to do it. And I'm sure I'm forgetting some. I know there's Spain that I forgot, Norway, and there's many others, but we need your help to make this happen, and we will be happy to support this work in Canada and around the world. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Minister Gibault. And now we have our final panelist. Her Excellency Sonia Guarara, Minister of Indigenous Peoples from Brazil. Minister Guarara, Brazil is home to the Amazon, one of the most critical ecosystems on our planet, and the indigenous communities who call it home have long been the most effective protectors of this forest. Please share with us the Brazilian government's exciting news and new actions to increase Indigenous conservation and rights, and how you will embed this agenda at the heart of COP30.
If you could put on your microphones. I am greeting in my mother tongue the Guajajara people, saying good morning to everyone who is here. I hope everyone is well. I want to greet you, all our women colleagues and men colleagues, and it's an honor to be here in this table, in the high-level debate with ministers on the environments, climate change in various parts of the world. And it's important to ensure that us indigenous peoples are working little by little, starting to be understood and recognized in the world and in the conventions. And this can be shown by my participation here. Brazil is trying to advance in complying with 3030, and one of the concrete measures were the creation of the Ministry of the Indigenous People. I am, for the first time, as a state minister. We are here with the greatest indigenous delegation in Brazil in any COP, and we are working very seriously together with President Lula so that we can reach deforestation zero to 2030. And we are working to remove all invasions who exploit illegally logging and mining. The Amazon forest includes 8 countries in South America and is almost the whole size of the Middle East, but it is near its inflection point, and we must ensure its conservation as soon as possible. Brazil is committed to reach 30% of protected biodiversity by 2030, and committed to strengthen the biodiversity framework with COP for the climate. Without the protection of biodiversity, we will not going to limit the increase of global warming and stay within 1.5. To reach 30 by 30, we need to talk about the territories and the rights of indigenous people. I'm very happy to that this was already cited, and the protagonism of the indigenous people is being mentioned here, because 80% of biodiversity is in the indigenous territory, and we need, therefore, to make the world and its leaders to advance in having instruments for providing titles and providing plain integral possession of lands for indigenous people, and practices to strengthen the ways of lives and an economy which is integrated with nature. As well as guaranteeing territory, we need to guarantee a way of life in order to face illegal mining, deforestation, and everything that destroys nature. We don't have much time, and we have seen the 28 climate conference were not enough to reduce emissions. So it is very important, going beyond thinking reducing carbon emissions, and see forests just as carbon sinks, think about the restoration of degraded areas, and think about the structures, conditions, support, financing to protect biodiversity, with all cultural biodiversity and people biodiversity that protects this planet, and who are today fighting to save Mother Earth. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Minister Guarana. Now that concludes our panel, but first I'd like to invite Mr. Tony Imadua, Principal Secretary for Climate Change and Energy from the Seychelles, to the stage for a few remarks. And while he's making his way, I'll flag a question. So, Principal Secretary Imadua, the Seychelles is a pioneer in innovative ocean protection. And we're very interested to hear more about your experience and how the Small Island Developing States Coalition for Nature is pioneering a roadmap towards implementation of 30 by 30 and the GBF.
Thank you, Jennifer. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Let me start by saying that Seychelles currently is protecting close to 50% of its scarce landmass territories. And through the Seychelles Marine Special Plan, the country has committed and designated 32.6% of its exclusive economic zone as protected areas, representing over 400,000 square kilometers of our ocean space. The Marine Special Plan for Seychelles is the first comprehensive marine special plan in the Western Indian Ocean. And the plan was just the beginning. To date, Seychelles has enacted new legislation for protected areas, developed a marine special plan policy, and introduced innovative financing mechanisms such as the Debt for Sword Nature and the Blue Bond. The country is currently in the process of establishing a new agency to coordinate implementation of the Marine Special Plan, including the development of management plan for the marine protected areas. Despite these successes, challenges still persist. Support is needed to manage these marine protected areas network and mitigate the threat to marine biodiversity and climate change impact. Furthermore, continuous capacity building for protected area managers is essential for research, monitoring, and enforcement, including advanced technologies for better monitoring and management of these areas. Excellencies, if we want to halt biodiversity loss and mitigate the impact from climate change, we must have greater ambition and greater action. Despite contributing very little to global emission, we as SEED are continuously showing our determination and willingness to address these global crises. And we are proving to the world that collectively we can have positive impact. At COP15, the Seed Coalition for Nature was launched with the main objective to catalyze strategic partnership to address seeds gap bridging priorities to implement the Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. With a current membership of 32 governments, of which 18 are seeds members across the 3 seed regions, the coalition made a call for action with 3 priorities aiming at enhancing means of implementing ambitious objectives for the nation. This includes strengthening the synergies between the 3 Rio Conventions. Under this perspective, Seychelles, as co-lead of the Seeds Coalition for Nature, I'm pleased to announce at this event, on behalf of the coalition, the launch of the Seeds Integrated Nature Climate Action Roadmap in coastal areas. Because greater and more urgent ambition requires larger and more targeted means, as stated in our call for action. This Seeds Roadmap aims to catalyze support for strengthening of seeds MPAs as measurable ecosystem-based approaches and effective nature-based solutions for climate action, in order to contribute to the implementation of the Paris Declaration and the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework in mutually reinforcing and integrated ways. In line with the Global Fund highlighted at this COP, and by seeking synergies between NDCs and MBSAP for integrated nature-based related planning and investment, our roadmap aims to accelerate the 30 by 30 target. It will particularly also contribute to the mangrove breakthrough, the coral reef breakthrough, and the Sharm el-Sheikh adaptation agenda. Seeds has been leading by example and frontrunners in nature conservation for our people and our environment. However, as Seeds of the coalition, our highest political will and stronger commitment from and for our people are not enough. We need greater and more targeted and integrated technical and functional support from the international community. We therefore call on our friends and partners in further supporting Seeds in leading by example through the implementation of this roadmap, which will greatly contribute towards global efforts towards climate change and halting biodiversity loss. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the ambition is high, the risks of inaction are also high. We must begin implementation of this global target if we want to see the benefit in 2030. I thank you.
Thanks so much, Mr. Amadouan. And can I get a round of applause for all of our panelists? Thank you for your excellent and hard work to preserve our beautiful and fragile planet. Everyone have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Acting Secretary Jennifer. That was brilliant and such a wonderful reminder of why Nature Day has to be central to how we move forward. And thank you to each of the panelists for sharing those strong commitments and spreading growing ambition to protect nature. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm told that there was a switch in the panelists, and actually His Excellency Benoit Charette will be in this panel coming up. He's the Minister for Environment, Fight Against Climate Change, Wildlife and Parks from Quebec, and he will be joining this one. And of course, we enjoyed the intervention of His Excellency Stephen Guilbeault from the Ministry of Environment in Canada. So we'll switch on and proceed to the next panel, which will be moderated wonderfully by His Excellency Haile Mariam Desalegn. He was the former Prime Minister of Ethiopia and Campaign for Nature Global Steering Committee member and of all-round nature champion. His Excellency will moderate the second panel on financing the future for nature conservation. And I'd also like to invite up on stage the panelists who will be up here with him. Excellency Benoit Charlette from the Ministry of Environment, Fight for Climate Change, Wildlife and Parks in Quebec. The Honorable Steve Barclay, Secretary of State for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs from the United Kingdom. His Excellency Steffi Lemke, the Minister for Environment, Nature Conservation, Nuclear Safety, Consumer Protection from Germany. She'll be coming up too. His Excellency Andreas Berland Eriksson, Minister for Climate and Environment from Norway. Excellency Virginijus Sinkevicius, Commissioner from the European Union, and Ms. Hong Patterson, the Chief Financial Officer and COO of the Green Climate Fund. Over to you, Your Excellency.
Your Excellencies, ministers, commissioners, champions for nature, delegates, I'm very thankful for the COP28 presidency, UAE, for inviting me to moderate this session. Without further ado, we are short of time, so I will directly go to the panelists. We have distinguished panelists from member states of the coalition. And let me introduce Excellency Steffi Lemek. If I apologize for the pronunciation of the names. Minister for Environment, Nature Conservation, Nuclear Safety, and Consumer Protection, Germany. Now, Minister Lemek, how is the implementation of the 30 by 30 target of the Global Biodiversity Framework being addressed in Germany, and in particular by your ministry, the German Federal Ministry for the Environment, Nature Conservation, Nuclear Safety, and Consumer Protection? What are your ministry's priorities in financing the international implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework? Minister.
Yes, thank you, and good morning from my side. Stephen Gilboa reminded us to a historic momentum last year, the Kunming-Montreal Agreement, and I want to remember us to another really successful negotiation and agreement, the BBNJ agreement, which we reached this spring. And this agreement is hugely important, and Germany has championed such an agreement for many years. We are really proud to be one of the first signatories. And with this instrument, we now have the chance to stop and reverse biodiversity loss and ecosystem destruction. This agreement is a groundbreaking step for international marine conservation and the 30 by 30 target. Germany is very serious about implementing the GBF. For example, we are updating our national strategy for biological diversity. And with our action plan on nature-based solutions for climate and biodiversity, we also strengthen and restore ecosystems on land, at the coasts and at sea. Our focus is on nature-based solutions. And for every GBF goal and target, adequate financing is essential for implementation. And Germany is leading by example. We will increase our international biodiversity financing as part of climate financing to 1.5 billion euros per year by 2025. Yes. It is important to us that the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund starts its work as quickly as possible. My ministry is already contributing 40 million euros this year to the International Climate Initiative. Together with Canada and the UK, we have provided the necessary startup funding. The Federal Environment Ministry is contributing 22 million euros to the Global ICCA Support Initiative, which highlights the crucial role of indigenous peoples and local communities in protecting biodiversity and achieving the 30 by 30 target. The NB-Sub Accelerator Partnership, which we launched with Colombia, also supports the 30 by 30 target. The goal is swift implementation of the GBF through a matchmaking platform that can be used to tap financial and non-financial resources from all sources. And the Legacy Landscape Fund is a further tool for implementing the 30 by 30 target. The Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development is providing over 200 million euros for this fund. Public and private donors work together in this fund to secure long-term financing for unique natural landscapes in the Global South. And with the same target in mind, we are contributing an additional 10 million euros to the Ecosystem-Based Adaptation Facility as part of the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund. And we are also providing 10 million euros for the CITES 3 species project. All these measures demonstrate our understanding that biodiversity has to be protected, used sustainably, and restored everywhere and across all ecosystems. Despite all efforts to date, the reports from the IPCC and IPBES paint a very bleak picture of the future. In other words, we all need to raise our level of ambition, and we will only achieve the goals and targets of the GBF and the Paris Agreement by joining forces and working together. Last, let me say, our time to act is limited, but our options for action are not. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Minister Lemek. We all have to raise our ambition. Thank you. That's your statement, and we need that. This is most encouraging. Thank you, Minister. Now, let me introduce Excellency Virginijus Sinkevičius, Commissioner for European Commission. Commissioner, as we all know, finance is key, which leads me to the EU Commissioner. How does the EU contribute to financing the 30 by 30 target within and outside the European Union? And how do you maximize impact? You have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much, and a very good morning to you all. It's my great pleasure to share with you this panel. First of all, I think what's key is the implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework. And if 30 by 30 target itself, it was already actually, even before the Kunming Montreal, we have had adopted it in our EU's biodiversity strategy. The new component, a crucial component, is the restoration target, which I'm very happy that we have reached a provisional agreement with the Parliament, and we are advancing in finalization of our nature restoration legislation. Because we see that global biodiversity framework cannot be a pick and choose menu. It has to be implemented as a whole. And of course, financing is going to play a crucial role. EU, together with our member states, are the biggest donor for the Biodiversity Fund. We implement a different scope of projects, and we have announced a doubling of our funding for biodiversity. Projects such as Natura Africa, which covers 44 sub-Saharan countries, is a good example of that. But I think the crucial element here, which has been also featured through the negotiations in Canada, in Montreal, and featured in the Global Biodiversity Framework, is actually using all possible resources from all sources. And first of all, of course, we're talking about development banks and their role that they can play. We need, of course, concrete projects that they could invest. Philanthropies, they can play a crucial role, especially when we add up, climate funds. It's incomparably bigger to the biodiversity one. So philanthropies can play a significant role too. The last part, just to finalize my short intervention, I'd say that we really need to do a much better job at looking into harmful subsidies. There is, such an odd situation when we spend so much time discussing a fund, the financing opportunities, making those difficult steps, tapping into all potential resources, while at the same time we know that harmful subsidies eat out those money so quickly. So I think, instead of making those 8 steps back, we should ensure that those money are actually contributing to the implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework, which also on top implements the Paris Agreement. So that's the key focuses that we should be putting, and EU, of course, will continue to play its role. As I've said, we've been those who announced the doubling and been the biggest contributor. We call on other donor countries to do the same, and most importantly, address the most vulnerable ones.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. You are doubling the biodiversity funding in the EU, and as well as dealing with harmful subsidies. And it's a very good initiative, and thank you for that. Let me go directly now to introducing Honorable Steve Berkeley, Secretary of State for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, United Kingdom. Honorable Minister, the UK co-led effort through the 10-point at COP28 to create a framework to help increase the flow of finance towards nature, both to developing countries and domestically, and was also pivotal in helping to agree the 30 by 30 target alongside high ambition coalition co-chairs, Costa Rica and France. And how have you built on these efforts individually as UK and with other coalitions? Minister.
Good morning, and firstly, thank you to the Presidency for bringing us all together, and thank you to you all for joining us. The UK is proud to have co-led and supported the global coalitions of ambition from their inception. And we continue to support the High Ambition Coalition with the global implementation of 30 by 30, where we will champion the ocean on the International Steering Committee, as well as through our ongoing leadership of the Global Ocean Alliance, including formalising a partnership with the HAC to continue our collaboration. And it's by working together to bring nature into the heart of our collective response to climate change, we saw that step change in Glasgow at COP26 that helped immensely also last year when the world came together at the UN Nature Summit, CBD COP15 in frozen Montreal, and we took on a clear global mission to halt and reverse that loss of biodiversity by 2030, including the commitment to protect at least 30% of the world's land and to protect 30% of the world's oceans by 2030. And by May, the UK will publish a country-wide response to the new global biodiversity framework as well. So for all of us now, I think the key is implementation. We know that this is far from straightforward because we are working on it ourselves in the UK. And today I'm delighted to announce that we will be making good on our commitment to publish a map setting out what 30 by 30 will look like on land back home in England and our plan to achieve it. I'm also delighted that the CBD's new Global Nature Fund has now been created the Global Environmental Facility, and that was something that the UK was one of the first countries to commit to, with the £10 million of funding to get it up and running. And last year, a coalition of more than 40 countries came together and committed to a 10-point plan for financing biodiversity, setting out the actions to plug the biodiversity funding gap. And this year we have taken stock of our progress through the dashboard, which colleagues can see on the screen behind us, to give us that shared view, that shared sense of where we are now, according to some of the latest data, which of course will evolve over time, and what we can do to get to where we need to be to meet our global commitments, to get the 30 billion of funding, nature flowing funding in by 2030 into developing countries, at least 20 billion by 2025, and of course $200 billion by 2030 as a global total. And alongside that greater investment in nature from all sources, this tool can help us shift trillions of dollars of existing flows, including trillions of dollars of public money, away from destruction and towards sustainability, resilience and renewal as well. And we must make headway on rewriting the rules, where that is what is needed to pick up the pace so we meet those 2025 and 2030 goals that I've just set out, including through the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosure Frameworks and the new Global Initiative for High-Integrity Biodiversity Credit Markets. And that was something we launched earlier this year alongside our good friends in France. At COP26 in Glasgow, 28 producer and consumer countries came together, representing more than 3/4 of global trade in forest risk commodities, committing to work together to break that link between agricultural commodity supply chains and deforestation, while supporting livelihoods and increasing sustainable trade, backed by £500 million of support from the United Kingdom. And today I'm delighted to announce that through our landmark Environment Act, our forest risk commodity legislation will make it illegal for larger regulated businesses to use soya, palm oil, cocoa and cattle products produced on land that is being occupied illegally, and to require them to undertake due diligence on their supply chains to ensure that this is not the case. So we work in partnership with countries who are trying to tackle this and give people across the UK the peace of mind that our national footprint is not contributing to illegal deforestation beyond our own shores. Lastly, I want to say that while time is not on our side, the solutions are in our hands. And as a global coalition of ambition, we have a vital role to play in making sure we back the hard work of countries around the world on which we all depend for our shared future and indeed our shared successes. So let's celebrate the progress we have made so far, but keep our focus on firmly turning that ambition into action in the months and years ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Minister Beckley. That's great to hear. And let me introduce now His Excellency Andreas Gjelland Eriksen, Minister of Climate and the Environment of Norway. Minister, what do you see as the critical factors in implementing the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework? How do you see Norway's role in the coming years as a contributor? Minister, you have.
Thank you very much, and dear Excellencies, dear ladies and gentlemen, I think we can all agree that the framework we now have and the clear mission we have together to urgently halt and reverse biodiversity loss is absolutely crucial for the work that's ahead of us. And not only do we now have ambitious goals, we also have a system to guide us in the implementation and commitment to provide resources going forward. And this can and will, I believe, pave the way for a change of direction on the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity on a global basis. We are going to do our part from the Norwegian perspective, and the Norwegian government has signaled a significant scale-up of our nature finance from all sources by 2026. And this is crucial because halting and reversing tropical forest loss is absolutely essential to fix the double climate and nature crisis. This can both protect nature and help us combat climate change. We in Norway have already set up strong tools to participate in this crucial work. Norway's International Climate and Forest Initiative, NICFI, is our largest international nature and climate initiative. We have contributed $5 billion to protect rainforests so far, and I'm very happy to state that this week the Norwegian Parliament approved a significant increase in the overall NICFI budget with more than 30%, which amounts to a $90 million increase in the budget for 2024. Furthermore, we also are very clear that we need to do our part back home, thus also increasing our national budget for forest preservation in Norway by $40 million as well. Norway will continue to deliver on our commitment to support the protection and restoration of the tropical rainforests, and at the same time implementing a steering system for nature back home. We are heavily involved in the work to further carry out the third objective of the Convention on Biological Diversity, the fair and equitable sharing of benefits from the utilization of genetic resources. Technological development through the use of DSI has led to COP28 establishing a multilateral mechanism and a fund. And Bezos Earth Fund and Norway has recently announced increasing funding, enabling informal work to be performed by COP28. This funding is meant to fuel and support broad and inclusive informal work, which has been ongoing for over 2 years and supported by many countries and organizations. We have a lot of work ahead of us, and the current levels of nature finance and institutional mechanisms for valuating and investing in biodiversity are not at the scale that we need. At the same time, we need to step up our actions back home, as His Excellency Stephen Barclay mentioned also in his comments. International agreements, they are not worth more than the sum of the work that we all do to follow up back home. Parties need to implement and translate the global targets into a national context and communicate the revised national biodiversity action plans by COP28 in 2024. All countries and regional economic integration organizations need to take domestic action, while developed countries and other countries and entities with the capacity to provide international public finance must enhance support for actions in developing countries to achieve our global targets. We have provided funding to the NBSAP accelerator co-chaired by Colombia and Germany, and to BioFin to provide support to parties to update their national biodiversity strategies in line with the new global framework. And Norway's priorities for the implementation of the global biodiversity framework will be formulated in a white paper delivered by COP28. I'm looking forward to presenting our approach and to see and discuss the approach taken by others. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Minister Eriksson, for the increase in the budget and also your commitment. I thank you. Let me introduce Excellency Benoit Charette, Minister of Environment, Fight Against Climate Change, Wildlife and Parks of Quebec. As you know, not only the federal governments, but regional states also play a major role and a vital role. Minister Charette, at COP15, the government of Quebec confirmed its engagement towards the new 30 by 30 target and has announced a new ambitious nature plan with a historic first investment of $350 million over 7 years. Since then, what has your government achieved in terms of concrete actions towards the 30 by 30 protection of its territory? You have the floor, Minister.
Thank you. Je vais faire mon intervention en français pour ceux et celles qui ne maîtrisent.
I am going to speak in French. If you don't speak French, let's just listen to the interpretation. We have been delighted to welcome COP15 in Montreal last year, and we were even happier to see the results and the commitments during this event. As you mentioned, this is a nature plan for Quebec that was announced with $650 million, and on top of that, another huge commitment, which was to create a blue fund with a similar amount. So this is $1.3 billion that were confirmed over this COP15 event. And obviously, this fund is going to be aiming at protecting biodiversity, and the blue fund to protect waterways and lakes, because Quebec has a lot of waterways. We are talking about 3% of fresh water in the world are locating in Quebec. So these are strong commitments that were taken. And what is specific about Quebec is that we rely on the participation of civil society, which gives strength to our commitments. So with this nature plan, we had a consultation over the last few months to see how we could invest this money so they could meet our objectives. Also, I am delighted to announce today that within the framework of these consultations and the following engagements, a further $144 million to create and protect even more territory in the south, and interconnectivity between the different networks that are protected. So this is another commitment that was taken thanks to this mobilization of our different communities. We also met the objectives for 2020, the protection of 17% of our land territory and 17% of sea territory. And after this commitment, we have recently confirmed a new approach to create the biggest sea park in Quebec that could cover thousands of square kilometers. So this is yet another commitment that happened in Montreal for COP15. So this was a strong participation of civil society to ensure, because before we were saying that if we want to measure the measure of a gesture, you need to love it. As someone said before, you have to measure what you protect. And without the mobilization of civil society, you cannot meet your objectives, and you cannot create the value of our actions. So both for land and sea, we have a consultation that is precious to us. And this is the federal state who participated in this panel. So this is a reflection of our engagement to have on board other states in Canada that can make a difference in world mobilization. So this is why we have a partnership with California, and we created a division of federal states within the High Ambition Coalition, and we have other federal states that joined us over different continents to ensure that on the local level we can involve ourselves and meet the objectives, the global objectives of 30 by 30. And I am confident that we are going to do it just like we do with 2020 objectives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Minister Erickson. Now, of course, the multilateral organizations have a role to play. We have, last but not least, I will turn to Ms. Hong. It is exciting to have the Global Climate Fund here today. The GCF is the only standalone multilateral financing entity whose sole mandate is to serve the convention. How is it maximizing the role of nature for climate and addressing the twin crises of biodiversity loss and climate change together? Ms. Song.
Thank you, and thank you for having me on the stage. And I think many of us have heard from the other countries and ministers their portion and their ambitions, and it's just so encouraging to hear this. Because just like climate change and biodiversity loss are two sides of the same coin, 30 by 30 could be the cornerstone for the common solution for this twin crisis. We are very, very excited to participate and to support the ambition of countries. Because as Minister Guilbeault had mentioned, we do need to work together to make sure that we can continue to increase the coverage of protected areas from 16.5% where we are today to 30% in only 6 years. And that really means that we do need to work with local communities, but we also have to work with the private sector. So the mandate of the GCF remains squarely focused on delivering climate impact, whether that's mitigation or adaptation or both. Without nature-based solutions, though, we won't be able to achieve these goals. So obviously, because of that and because of our mandate to maintain balance between mitigation of 50-50 and adaptation, about half of our portfolio, $7 billion, is either directly or indirectly invested in nature, biodiversity, and conservation. And that's actually attracted a further $14.5 or so billion. So it is not an insignificant amount of money that we're placing into nature-based solutions. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. So I guess the best way to exemplify how we work, I'll give you a few examples. We recently worked with WWF on a $43 million project called Herencia Colombia. And that's where the national government has committed to mobilizing financing for conservation of key ecosystem across Colombia in perpetuity. And it ranges from the heart of the Amazon all the way to the Caribbean coastline. And they're just reallocating revenues coming from extractive industries and carbon taxes to support these ecosystems for decades to come. And that's really intended, the $43 million project is going to bring in about $200 million worth of financing. And so this speaks very much in terms of what the EC commissioner had discussed in terms of removing some of the subsidies. And so that's a really good example of where we can help catalyze change. Just a few days ago, we announced the launch of, with the Caribbean Development Bank, the Blue Co-Caribbean, which is a $42 million co-investment platform that's aimed to crowd in financing from all sources for the blue economy across 14 Caribbean countries, including conservation for the region's exceptional coastline and marine ecosystems. Now, as we move from our first investment cycle, onto the second one, which starts in 2024, and it's a 4-year cycle, we've really scaled up our ambition for delivering nature-based solutions with the aim of placing up to 190 million hectares of terrestrial and marine ecosystems under conservation, sustainable management, or restoration. Just a couple of days ago at COP, we actually announced our $1 million grant, just over $1 million, to support the development of a $68 million project aimed at establishing biobusinesses incubator in the Peruvian Amazon. And I shouldn't be biased, but this is one of my favorite projects. Because it's entirely dedicated to Indigenous peoples, and it really illustrates the need to move away from a do-no-harm approach with Indigenous peoples and thinking about just safeguards, but really meeting their legitimate aspirations for a more sustainable and prosperous nature. We work with over 200 partners, and that really underscores our ability to catalyze investments. So I am looking forward to working with these partners to support our 30 by 30 projects.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mrs. Han. I think the recognition of this is only the tip of the iceberg is very, very essential, and I thank you for that. I think the global commitment must translate into local actions. So my emphasis that the adoption of both the Paris Agreement and the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework were global commitments but its success hinges on concrete actions taken at national level and the support that's given to this. Mobilizing resources for impact for both climate and nature. I want to highlight the significance of financial support for developing countries. Thank you for your commitments. Coming from all sources is very critical. And science, as we have seen, has shown us protecting and conserving at least 30% of the planet's land and the ocean by 2030, which is target 3, has positive co-benefits for both climate adaptation and mitigation, as well as biodiversity recovery and restoration, and we have to focus on that. The High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People, co-chaired by Costa Rica, France, and the UK, co-hosted by your organization, Jeff, and WRI. We thank you for support members through increased capacity building, technical and financial matchmaking between members' requests and the market offers in order to implement the global target of 30 by 30. And I appreciate the contribution of the Secretariat for this. So let's give a round of applause to our panelists, distinguished panelists, and thank you very much for taking your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency Dessalines and the panel. Indeed, finance crucial for us to meet the goals of the High Ambition Coalition. And we're now nearing the end of our event, and to share some closing remarks, I would like to invite to stage Christophe Béchu. He's the Minister for Ecological Transition from France. Unfortunately, our co-chair from Costa Rica, Franz Tattenbach, had to leave, but we will hear from Minister Béchu. Please, over to you.
Chers ministres, chers participants,
dear ministers, dear participants, as Stephen Guilbeault said a few seconds ago, 1 year to the date, at COP28, we signed the Kunming-Montreal Agreement. That was a historic moment so that biodiversity, just like climate with the Paris Agreement, would be supported by commitment by all member states to have a proper calendar and an ambition. I would like to extend my gratitude to this COP28 presidency, everyone who you made possible this specific moment in COP28. We have the global stocktake for the Paris Agreement, and we have some moments, some events that remind us that there is not on one side the need to fight against emission and to adapt, and the other side biodiversity. But we have a intertwined fight, so we have to take care of both sides with the same level of intensity. Nature-based solution that allowed to fight against climate changes deserve us to increase our ambitions and resources to have biodiversity and climate who have the same level of priority as climate policies. For 1 year, many actions have been done in very diverse action in different countries, and now we see how it adds up. And now, as France, we can offer our new commitment for biodiversity will be the 6th of a kind suggested to the Secretary General, and this is the
préservation de la biodiversité.
the manifestation of how we have a national strategy. So how our strategy is based on the Kunming, Montreal, as well as European rules, especially the vote by the nature restoration in July of this year at the European Parliament. This strategy is also based on the 30 per 30, as our country has reached its percentage and the defined percentage. And our last step is to define more precisely what are the 10% of higher protected zones and what are the rules, so that these spaces are real sanctuaries and not a red spot on a map. And that would make us think that this is an ambition that is only administrative ambition. And we also need to have resources, 1 billion euros by next year for biodiversity preservation policies with water to help wildlife as well, and fight against pollution and to restore wet zones. Besides all this, France has committed to double by 2025 the funds for the development support to help biodiversity support policies. So it's another €1 billion, which is within the development aid project. Ladies and gentlemen, dear participants,
nous avons, il y a un an, bénéficié.
A year ago, we had a huge momentum that led us to have this global framework. And this momentum is not over. It extended with the BBNG Treaty a few months ago, that is intertwined with national ambitions with the biodiversity, when we see the role of oceans and how much diversity they host.
Pour la France.
I want to say how much for France to chair, along with Costa Rica, this high ambition coalition for biodiversity and populations is amazing. And I would like to extend my gratitude to my colleague from Costa Rica, France, and I want to reiterate how our ambition is to make this coalition that led us to agreements becomes an effective platform for solutions and implementation. We are structuring this coalition, and we are very proud that a few hours ago we have China that joined us, and also we have the same ambition we have the ambition to use this coalition and platform to suggest concrete and shared solutions, to share our good practices within the coalition. So this is going to be France's task within the coalition, along with Costa Rica and along with all of you. Do not stop your efforts. Use this momentum. Go faster. We have to go faster for the climate, but it is also true for biodiversity. It is time. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much for that, Minister Bechu. And I see Minister Tattenbach is back. I want to invite him to take the floor.
Thank you. I'm delighted to take the floor. Excellencies, esteemed delegates, and dear friends, today marks a pivotal moment in our collective endeavor to safeguard biodiversity of our planet and mitigate the impacts of climate change. The discussions held during the high-level event have been critical, highlighting not only the urgency of our situation, but also the tremendous opportunities that lies in front of us to tackle both climate change and biodiversity loss. Has been put forward very eloquently. As we progress to the implementation of Target 3 of the Global Biodiversity Framework and the significant efforts of the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People, it is evident that collaboration and shared determination hold immense power. Costa Rica is very proud to be co-chair of the coalition and amongst the nations committed of achieving this ambitious goal. The 30 by 30 target represents hope in the challenge we have to mitigate climate change and halt and revert biodiversity loss. It demonstrates our dedication to safeguarding and preserving our valuable ecosystem, acknowledging their significant role reducing the effects of climate change and conserving biodiversity. From my country's perspective, I wish to take the opportunity to call for renewed efforts on the Blue Agenda. Recognizing that the indispensable role of the ocean, origin, and responsibility for all life on Earth in the regulation of the climate, Costa Rica launched this year on its National Blue Carbon Strategy a framework that integrates actions for the management, conservation, restoration, and rehabilitation of blue carbon ecosystems, mangroves. On the other hand, Costa Rica updated and prioritized of sites for the restoration, conservation, and management of marine area. Moving forward, together with France, Costa Rica will be co-chairing the next United Nations Conference on the Ocean in 2025. And I wish to invite all of you to continue this conversation during the high-level event towards UNOC 3 that will take place in San Jose next June. I am very happy to also announce that Costa Rica, with the HAC Secretariat, will work on organizing a dedicated workshop for Latin American countries to train HAC focal points and other national agencies to use the HAC matching platform that was presented earlier. The High Ambitious Coalition for Nature and People embodies the spirit of unity and ambition necessary to catalyze transformative change. We are very excited to present and share the different tools of the progress of the HAC for nature and people. Today and during this COP, Costa Rica has been part of this coalition since the beginning. We are proud to continue our work with 117 countries, or should I say 118 countries, and welcome China for having joined the HAC. Welcome very much. 118 countries now. I did not have updated my speech. As we depart from this event, let us maintain the momentum and commitment made here today. Let us be catalysts of change within our respective spheres, driving forward the implementation of this vital goal. I extend my sincerest gratitude to all the participants for your invaluable contributions and dedication. It is through our collective determination and action that we will chart a sustainable path towards a resilient and biodiverse future for generations to come. Thank you very much.
Well, Ministers, thank you very much, and Excellencies, for your interventions and for kicking us off today in such good form. You're showing the power of true collaborative action, first through political mobilization and diplomatic engagement for the adoption of the 30 by 30, but also setting such high ambitions for this coalition. Coalitions like this accelerate progress, they set standards, they build momentum, and they foster the sort of collaboration we absolutely need in this decisive decade. I'd like to finish by thanking each and every one of you for attending today's session and sharing your morning with us. Thank our speakers and, of course, the team that put all of this together. And we hope that the collaboration between the High Ambition for Coalition and Nature, the Campaign for Nature, the high-level champions for climate, is one of many that we will see in more events in the months to come. And we must maintain this momentum, putting nature at the center of every single discussion at the highest level. We simply cannot wait 6 years to take action Action needs to be taken right now. At the highest level, I call on every climate and nature leader in this room to take this message back home and through every corridor you walk. Scale up ambition so that we can say in 2030 that we halted and reversed biodiversity loss on the path to recovery. This is and has to be our common goal, and actions must begin right now. I leave you with these wonderful words of Libby Roderick, who said, "When I was young, I thought, I dreamed the earth was healed and whole again. Creatures, trees, and rivers, free and wild. Now I'm old, I dream the planet healed and whole again. That dream reborn in the heart of every new child." So we, all of us, are planting winter wheat that other hands will harvest, that they might have enough to eat after we are gone. We'll plant shade trees that we will not sit under. We'll struggle for justice, though we'll never see it flower. Our children's children will live in peace one day. Thank you very much for being here today.